It is Friday, and I did a video the other day where I mentioned my brother Dave. And of course, my brother Dave passed away a little over a year ago in April of last year. And I was talking to somebody recently about something else, and it reminded me of a story. And what happened was I was walking through an antique shop, and I saw a glass insulator for sale. And glass insulators, you used to see them on telephone poles or power lines where the overhead lines were on wooden poles. And so they'd have a glass insulator to keep the electricity from leaking into the wood. And in later years, they replaced those poles with metal poles, or they put lines underground, and the glass insulators went away. And you often see them now in antique shops for a couple bucks. And there's a lot of them out there. And I wish I'd bought one, because I don't have one right now, but I used to have a lot of them as a kid, and I'll tell you why. My family used to vacation in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and my grandmother lived in a little town called Alston. And I actually went to look up Alston today to see what the population of it is, and I couldn't find a number. But the township that it is in has a population in the 400s, and there's not a whole lot there anymore. It used to be a thriving community, but not a whole lot anymore. But in the 60s, my family would go up there on vacation, and we'd hang out at my grandmother's house in Alston or my grandfather's house in the Houghton Hancock area. And so I've mentioned before, I used to go like trout fishing with my brother, Dave, and we'd go, just like right out of a, Tom Sawyer. We'd literally get the sticks and the strings and the hooks and no fishing rods or anything like that, nothing fancy, and go trout fishing. But one summer, we're driving along in the International Travelall, or lovingly referred to as the Lehto mobile. And I'm not sure if all my brothers were there. I think it may have just been most of my brothers. I think one of the brothers actually stayed home for some reason. And my mother was driving. My father was not with us either. And we saw a pile of telephone poles by the side of the road. And they had just put a lot of lines underground, a big pile, a big stack of telephone poles, and they were going to scrap them. At least that's what we thought. So we decided to, my mom decided we could stop the car, and if we wanted to, we could grab some of those insulators off those telephone poles. And so we're, looking for insulators, and if they're cracked or, busted up, you leave them, but you're looking for the good ones. And you could bring them down to the Detroit area and sell them at a garage sale and make some money. Ask me how I know. But anyways, they still pop up in antique shops to this day. And so my brother Dave was 5 years older than I was. And this was around when I was in first or second grade. So Dave was sixth or seventh grade. And I actually asked him more specifically about this story just a couple years ago, and I got some of the facts that I did not know originally. But he told me the whole story again, and I remember now talking to him about this. And he was reaching through some telephone poles. These are all stacked up on the side of the road. And he'd seen an insulator in there, and he went to unscrew it, and he accidentally ran his arm over something jagged, probably a broken insulator. And he yelled, and he leaned back and pulled his arm up, and there was blood gushing from his arm. And I remember seeing it, and it was the most traumatic thing I'd ever seen with my own eyes up to that point in my life, although I was still quite young. And my mom looked over and immediately realized how bad this was. And remember, we are just outside of Alston, Michigan. The nearest hospital, possibly, or clinic, would be in Baraga, which I think is about 10 or 15 miles east of us at that moment in time, or Lance, which is even further around. And so my mom's got the station wagon and 5 boys, one of whom is injured quite badly. And my mom runs over to a house. There just happens to be a house right near there, knocks on the door, and a woman answers the door, and she somehow very quickly realizes what's happening. And she goes, "I'm a nurse. Jump in the car and take me. I'll tell you where to go." So my mom and my brother Dave and a nurse who just happened to be there jump into the car, and the nurse, of course, is doing this to my brother's arm to try to slow the bleeding. And she says, "Just as fast as you can go." And they take off. Now, this story at this point diverges. My viewpoint, Dave's viewpoint. Because me and my other brothers are all standing there going, what do we do? Now, it's afternoon, the Upper Peninsula, in the summertime, and it'll be light out till about 10 o'clock at night. So we've got all the time in the world of daylight. But I actually went and map quested it. And it turns out it was only about a mile or a mile and a half walk home to my grandmother's house. But keep in mind, I'm in first grade, second grade, and then the brothers are all older than me like that. And we're like, huh. And of course, this is long before cell phones had even been thought of. And there were no payphones anywhere around. After all, Alston ain't that big of a town. Although at that point in time, Alston did have an IGA store, which is another story altogether. So one of the older brothers goes, I guess we should just head home. Because the debate was, should we wait for Mom to come back and get us? And we realized it's not that long of a walk. We could have cut through the woods. I map quested that too. That would have been about a half a mile. But that would have involved us going through some very, very deep woods. And so we decided to take the highway down to the road and then the little dirt road to my grandmother's house. And yes, she lived on a dirt road. And so we walked and we're discussing how bad's Dave's injury. Because it looked bad. And it's a hike into town. And so we're all kind of like worried about what's going to happen to him. And of course, we're walking along and my mom hadn't given us any detailed instructions. And so we finally get home and my grandmother hears us come in the house, but didn't hear a car roll up the driveway or all the slamming doors as all the kids piled out of the Lehto mobile. And my grandmother goes, where's your mother? Where's your mother? So, of course, a bunch of little boys start babbling to her about how one of us got injured and my mother has taken him to the hospital. Now, keep in mind, long before cell phones, my grandmother had a phone. It may have been a party line. I know that she had a party line at one point in time. I just don't know if it was a party line then. But what's she going to do? Start calling local hospitals? So my grandmother's not sure what to do either. So I remember us all sitting around, just kind of looking at each other, like, what's going on, you know? And then a while later, and it was quite a bit later, they came home. And of course, we got the story. And as they were racing towards Baraga, the woman in the car with my mother, who was a nurse, said, I work with a doctor in Lance. And Lance is right around the bottom of the Keweenaw Bay. So it's a couple miles beyond Baraga, give or take. And she goes, he's home right now. And he lives right across the street from his clinic. And if we go there right now, he'll be there and he can take care of Dave. And my mom goes, okay. So my mom, and again, keep in mind my mother is driving like a maniac because I know she can drive like a maniac when she wanted to. I saw on a couple occasions my mother driving like a maniac. My mother's passed away now, so I can say that. She would not have agreed with that statement, but my brothers would. And so she's driving like a maniac in the international travel law, the Lehto mobile, zipping along the freeway as best she can, probably at like 55 miles an hour, because I don't know if that thing could go much faster than that. And zooming around. Meanwhile, the woman's trying to do what she can to keep my brother from dying. And they pull in the driveway, and the nurse runs up to the house, and the doctor comes running out, runs over, opens up the clinic, brings my brother in, and my brother literally, and I'm talking 60 years later, goes, do you know what I remember the most about that event? He goes, I remember being terrified, utterly terrified, until the doctor got there. And he said the doctor looked at my arm and so casually said, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Come on in here, lay down here, put your arm here, you're fine, don't worry about it, you're going to be fine, you're going to be fine. And my brother said at that moment in time, it was up until then sheer terror, because he thought, the last thing he might see is the, sights whizzing by before they got to Baraga. And the doctor wound up stitching up his arm, and it took a whole bunch of stitches because he'd hit one of the major thoroughfares in his arm. And when they were done, the doctor's like, hey, there you go, you're all set now. you're good. And my brother said that it wasn't until a little while later he started thinking about it. And he goes, you know something? I think it was probably a little worse than that doctor made it out to be. But also, a smart doctor would think, one, calm the patient down. It's not going to help to have the patient be all fired up. But two, calming the patient down would probably also help slow his pulse and so on. I mean, on some level. And three, I mean, what else can you do? Dude, you're dying. I mean, And so I remember my brother said, Steve, that's the most impactful thing I remember about that story. He goes, if I think back on that story, I think back to how that doctor was so calm when he said, hey, you're going to be okay. Don't worry about it. Come on in here. And just calm voice. Don't worry about it. You're good. Took care of him, fixed him, fine. And the weird thing is, I told Dave, Dave, do you know what my memory of that day is? He goes, what's that? And I go, I can remember where we were in relationship to the road, such that the road is here, I'm facing this way, you're standing here, and I remember you, referring to my brother Dave, I remember you standing like straight as he was leaning in to get something. And I remember you straightening up and your arm, and I just remember the image of how catastrophic that looked. And I remember the next 90 seconds being a blur of mom running the house, all of you piling into the station wagon, and you guys just disappearing. And think about that from a viewpoint of a first grader or a second grader, right? Your mom grabs a nurse and piles your little, your older brother in, but he's still a little kid, into the station wagon, and they just disappear. And it was so hurried, my mom didn't even say, you guys walk home or you guys stay here, or hey, Bruce, you're in charge. No. She just took off. And that was so unusual that it struck me at the time as being, okay, this is serious. And I said to Dave, you understand that mom didn't call from the clinic, her own mother, and say, by the way, just to let you know, Davey's okay. She didn't do that. She got back in the station wagon, Lehto mobile, drove the nurse home, dropped her off, and then nonchalantly drove my brother home, pulled up the driveway and walked into the house, and we're like, hey, check it out, Dave's alive. Because he knew how the story ended. We didn't. And so it's kind of weird because that story became folklore in our family. It was such a big event. And I remember years and years and years later, I'm talking about it was like 5 years ago, talking to Dave and going, hey, Dave, let me see the scar. And he'd go like this and show it to me. And it was still there. And it wasn't a big scar, but it was a scar. But right where it was, you could tell that, yeah, if that was a little bit too deep, that'd be a pretty bad place to get a cut. So it's a wild story. And I have so many memories of that place. And I know that 99.9% of my audience will never pass through Alston, Michigan. But if you do, it's a neat little town. There's not a whole lot left there anymore. There's a bar called the Church in the Valley. And that bar has been there a million years, but it's changed names a few times. And occasionally you'll see me wear on camera a shirt that says Church in the Valley. I stopped by there on a recent visit, and they were kind enough to give me a T-shirt. And that bar is still there. And east of it, just a little ways, is a business that does like small engine repair. And next to that is a baseball diamond that, again, looks straight out of a Norman Rockwell painting. It's got the backstop and the wooden stands and an outfield fence with signs on it, advertising signs. I've never watched a game there, but I've driven by when there was a game there. And that's the kind of place, almost like Field of Dreams, where if you saw a game taking place, or you'd want to stop and just watch it to take in the Americana. But that little group of buildings is right near the spot where Dave cut himself on the insulator back in the day. And I was talking to somebody recently about that. And again, like I said, I was at an antique shop over the weekend, and I saw a little glass insulator. And I'm like, oh my, that brings back memories. But it was kind of wild. But yeah, so my brother Dave, he passed away. It was April 3rd of last year. So I heard about it first on April 4th in the morning. But yeah, it's one of the craziest stories. And again, what's weird about it is that I knew the story because I had been there. But for the longest time, I never asked him about it. It was the weirdest thing. And I'm not sure if it's because I just assumed I knew the whole story or not. And a couple of years ago, we were talking about something. I said, hey, Dave, remember when you cut your arm on the insulator? And he goes, yeah, of course. And I said, I don't know if I've ever asked you or mentioned to you that story from my viewpoint was you got injured and disappeared. And me and the rest of the brothers are like, oh, I guess we'll walk home. like we had a really weird experience, and we were worried about you the whole time. I said, but I'm not sure I've ever asked you exactly the whole story. And he said, oh, okay. And then he told me the whole story, about how the nurse said, because I in my mind, I thought they went to Barriga. He goes, no, we went past Barriga to Lawrence. I'm like, oh, that's even crazier, because that added a few minutes to the trip. So crazy story. I was reminded of that recently. And it's one of those stories, it's not a happy memory, but he made it. He was fine in the end, but it's one of those scary memories. But, like I said, I go up north every single summer, and when I drive down that stretch of road, there's the church in the valley. There's a neat little church up in Nisula right past Alston, and I can drive by where my grandmother's house used to be. It's not there anymore. And I drive by the old baseball diamond, and I almost always stop and think to myself, and that's where the pile of telephone poles was where Dave got hurt all those years ago. Unbelievable. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.